Armenia's Prime Minister warns of a coup as calls grow for his resignation. Will Nikol Pashinyan be able to survive? And what does the challenge by the army mean for the country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. Armenia's Prime Minister has faced months of protests and several attempts in Parliament to dismiss him. But despite the growing discontent over his handling of the war with Azerbaijan in Nagorno-Karabakh, Nikol Pashinyan has been defiant. Well, now the army is demanding he leaves office. He's fired the army chief and accused the military of an attempted coup. Pashinyan says the army should not be involved in the political process and has rallied supporters behind him. His opponents have held a rival rally and set up a camp outside the parliament to pressure him to quit the job. Armenia's traditional ally Russia says it's alarmed by the events. It's been joined by the US in calling for restraint in the country. Robin Forestier-Walker reports from Yerevan.
Nikol Pashinyan on Thursday was able to bring out large numbers of his supporters to the center of the capital, Yerevan, with a live Facebook message calling on them to show that he is still in charge and that he has the popular support of the Armenian people, because his authority is now in question. We've had the generals, so many of them signing a letter calling for him and his government to resign. We have the Armenian church supporting his resignation. The question now is whether the president of Armenia, whose powers are limited, whether he is also going to weigh in and whether he can critically undermine Nikol Pashinyan's authority. He now has to decide whether to accept the letter calling for the dismissal of the head of the armed forces, which Nikol Pashinyan wants, having said that their call for him to resign amounted to an attempted military coup. He has 3 days, or he had 3 days from Thursday, to decide whether or not to go ahead with Mr. Pashinyan's request. If he doesn't, this raises serious questions about Mr. Pashinyan's future. And that future can go one of two ways. He can either cling on to power, or he can try to agree to snap elections, which also will be tricky for him, because in order to do that, he has to resign, and then the parliament would have to support new elections. What the opposition are calling for is not immediate elections. They want an interim government that would take charge with elections much further down the line. But still, everything at the moment hangs in the balance for the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan.
Rory Challens now takes a look at Nikol Pashinyan's rise to power and his apparent declining popularity.
Late last year, as the conflict with Azerbaijan raged, Al Jazeera's Bernard Smith sat down with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. At the end of the interview, he asked him this question.
Do you worry for your own popularity that if you mishandle this conflict, if it doesn't go your way, then you yourself are going to suffer in your position as Prime Minister?
Well, you see, I reached the position of the Prime Minister not to defend my popularity, but to serve the national interests of my country and my people, and to defend the dreams of my people and my country. So along this path, I'm absolutely not interested in my person.
That's just as well. Armenia lost the war and Pashinyan's popularity diminished. Though it was just 2 years ago, these scenes of Pashinyan basking in the huge crowd's adulation as he became Prime Minister are from a different political age. Then he was the man of the moment, a former journalist, an opposition politician who at the end of March 2018 launched a protest organisation called My Step. In his camo t-shirt and cap, Pashinyan came across as an everyman antidote to the perceived cynicism and corruption of Armenia's ruling elite. Two-term President Serge Sargsyan was trying to continue his rule by becoming Prime Minister. The crowds were determined to stop him. The so-called Velvet Revolution forced Sargsyan from power And after 2 elections in May 2018, Pashinyan replaced him. But governing Armenia isn't easy. Besides its entrenched domestic problems, Pashinyan was also taking on Armenia's fraught regional relationships. In October 2020, the stalled peace talks with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh collapsed. Armed and assisted by Turkey, Azerbaijan went on a devastating offensive. To stave off a complete rout, Pashinyan accepted a humiliating Russian-brokered ceasefire, giving up swathes of formerly Armenian-controlled territory. It cost him huge political capital and opened a rift between his government and the military.
This is the end of the Velvet Revolution. Pashinyan made it very clear in his speech that he said, this is the end of Velvet. What that means and what comes after is anyone's guess. There is a lot of instability in the country after the war that ended in November of 2020. The opposition has been calling for his resignation.
Not long ago, he was the figurehead of a more democratic and equitable Armenia. Now, Nikol Pashinyan's political future hangs in the balance. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera.
All right, let's bring our guests into the show. We have joining us from Yerevan, Hamazasp Danielian, Member of Parliament representing the governing My Step Alliance, and Arsen Kharatian, an independent analyst on conflict resolution, former advisor to Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, and Tevan Pogosyan, president of the International Center for Human Development and an ad hoc advisor to the President of Armenia. Thank you for all of you for joining us. Let me start with Hamazasp. Can the Prime Minister survive this challenge, Hamazasp?
I believe you are referring to the internal turmoil and which some people also call as a political crisis. Well, in my opinion, the nature of this crisis is not only about the Prime Minister, it's also about the state institutions and democratic way of governing Armenia, because those political forces who are challenging the status quo and legitimately elected government are anti-democratic by their political biography and rhetoric.
I'm referring to that. I'm also referring to what the Prime Minister himself is warning about, that there's a plan for a coup, he said. Can he survive?
Well, I think the announcement that you were referring was made as of yesterday morning, because there was a statement coming from a number of high-ranking military officials who called for resignation of the Prime Minister. I want to bring to your attention to the basic fact that not only in any democratic countries, but in particularly in Armenia, constitutional has a very clear ban on military personnel to make political demands, and resignation of Prime Minister is political by its nature, by definition. Therefore, I think that, and I hope that this announcement will not follow with any significant development.
All right, let me bring Tevan into the discussion. We understand you're an ad hoc advisor to the president. The president has been meeting with military leaders. What do you think his message is going to be? Will he be reflecting that sort of message which Hamazasp explained for us, that perspective that their announcement or their call for the resignation, I mean, this is a threat not only to the Prime Minister, but to the civilian institutions of democracy?
First of all, let me go ahead with the point of view that I don't think that civilian institutions of democracy are under the threats with such a statement, because civilian institutions of democracy in the parliamentary governing model countries are done in the parliament. And when the parliament is not getting into the discussion and not developing a political consensus, developing negotiation rooms, or there is no other place to speak, people are speaking in a way as possible to the optional points. That's why I think the what is going on process now, which is run by the presidential administration, is negotiation with all the players. Today he has been meeting with the.
But hang on,
all,
Tivan, should the army be
factions.
the one expressing that message?
But it's happened to army. Army has kept the silence for the last 4 months. Something happened.
Shouldn't they keep silent
triggered.
and leave that for the politicians to work out who resigns and who stays in office?
Sorry, the point is the following. Whatever has happened, it's happened to army. And what they done, they just warned that, guys, not anymore possible by this way of governing to keep the security of the country. So who should raise this issue? That's why they raised an issue, and now is the issue of the politicians. Try to deal with this, find a solution, find the possibility to come to the peaceful resolution of the situation, and go and do it in a very proper way. That because if the democratic institutions of the country were properly worked after November 9, I do believe that we will never have such a statement from the army.
All right, let's bring in Arsen then. How realistic is the warning of a coup? Is the country really facing a coup?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting this great panel, and thank you, Al Jazeera, for bringing us Armenians together in this English language program. It's a very good question. I don't think very large parts of the public are very much convinced that this was actually a coup. I personally believe that the statement, I mean, again, the communication continues to be one of the largest problems. And I think that there is a political crisis, as much as a lot of my friends in the ruling party may not recognize it or may think otherwise, which is perfectly fine. But a debate and an understanding is needed, clearly. I don't know how realistic is this coup, especially considering or taking into account the realities that we're living in the post-war, post-Karabakh war situation in the country. I think we would not have gotten to this point if at an earlier stage, after the trilateral agreement signed or announcement signed on November 9th, rogue moves were taken by the Prime Minister and the ruling party. And I think this crisis or another way of handling this issue could be already there if there were quicker moves. Resignations could have helped. Keeping the same party in line, but changing some of the top leadership could be a solution, which didn't happen before this. Now, how realistic is this coup? I'm not sure about it. What are the generals? Is there a junta in the country? I don't think so. However, one thing is very clear. It is that Armenia has never faced a situation like this. We have no history of coups in the last 30 years. And this is the very first time that we're hearing this. Evidence of anything that relates to the coup has not been published yet. I assume and I hope that the administration will actually clearly explain to the public what, who, and when. Who was trying to do what? Was there any group within the military, within the security administration that was trying to take over power by force?
Okay.
Was there a threat that any generals could come together and decide to make arrests or anything? These are issues and questions that are out there, and I haven't heard much response, and I expect, and I hope that my friend and colleague Hamazasp may address this.
Speaking of Hamazasp, what do you make then of the suggestions and the sentiment we sometimes hear from Armenians that, hey, the country doesn't have a history of coups, as Arsen pointed out? This might be more of a smokescreen by the Prime Minister to stay in power and ignore the calls for his resignation.
Well, few facts should be established before going into opinions. Because the assessment that there was no military involvement in politics in Armenian history, I would not agree with that comment, because Arsen Haratsun, as a witness, probably would remember how, for example, army was dislocated into the capital of Armenia, and peaceful demonstrators were dispersed and human lives were lost in 2008, for example. There were other occasions as well.
Yeah. No, you're exactly.
What is different this time around? What is
All I
different
was
this
saying
time around?
All right, go ahead for a quick second, Arsen, and then we'll give Hamazasp an opportunity to finish the thought.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Just wanted to make it clear. I did not say we did not have any military involvements in politics. What I said is we don't have a coup history.
Okay,
That's
all right. Hamazasp, continue the thought.
Well, in the sense that, yes, generals take over the government and make political decisions. That's true, and it is important that we upheld that tradition because, again, I want to emphasize that this is not about the name, particular names. It is about state institutions that should remain within their rights and responsibilities that are designed
Hamazasp, allow me to jump in and ask this question. If the Prime Minister wants to preserve state institutions and he's really worried, why not, at the very least, if he doesn't want to resign, why not have called a snap election? It was clear that there was a question mark over his popularity after the war. Wouldn't a snap election have resolved that?
Thank you for this very important question, because it should be clarified that back in December, it was announced by Prime Minister that as a representative and leader of ruling party, he opens up consultations on the possibilities of organizing snap elections in Armenia. And during the preceding 2 months, there were discussions with a number of parliamentary parties and extra parliamentary parties. But what is important to recognize that the parties that call for his resignation, that are united and organize continuous street protests with anti-democratic rhetoric and hate speech, those are the parties that rejected this opportunity. Moreover, they not only spoke against the snap elections, but also their demand is immediate resignation of Prime Minister and appointment of their own candidate, which has no support within the parliament.
Okay, that's an interesting
it's
point.
Clear that,
let me take that point.
It's clear that even if we recognize this is as a political crisis, the way forward in this political crisis should be democratic.
Okay.
And organization of snap elections is something that was also mentioned during yesterday, ready by Prime Minister, that we are open for consultations. We just need to sit down in a civilized way, have a dialogue, and this dialogue is open to any party. Understand the timeline, action plan, what should be done.
Let's give
Tevan.
All right, Hamazasp, let's give Tevan a chance to come in on that. Go ahead, Tevan.
See, like, this is the classical way of showing how democracy working in Armenia. When instead of respecting each other's time, having a proper dialogue, we would occupy the whole time of the others, and first of all, presenting not the whole information. In the parliamentary democracy, there are many times when prime ministers resigning and you are not going to the election. And second, if you wish to go to election, as I remember, one of the leaders of ruling party says that we have a strong team. And once back in 2018, November, you chose the best shortest mechanism of go to the election. Then just simply do it, not wait or not blame the others. Just implement, because you have promises to your voters and not to the just simply oppositional parties.
Tevan, let me present as well, if I may jump in there as well for you, and ask you, how would you respond, though, to the suggestion that the reason that the opposition wants the Prime Minister to resign and want to come together and figure out the next leader without elections is because they know the political alternatives to the Prime Minister know they don't have enough popularity. The Prime Minister's popularity, so the narrative goes, may have sunk, but the alternatives know that they are even less popular.
You know, it's a popularity or the Karabakh issue and the capitulation after the patriotic war of in Artsakh Republic brought to the situation that we don't have the really popularity of the whole ruling party. But the issue is not on that side. Something should happen, as Minister Karacan said, that if the ruling party will manage it by itself some proper resignational processes, we will have a totally different process. But now we need to also understand that it's now a very emotional period of time. And hate speech is not just simply appeared after November 9, but it has been permanently for the last 2 years in Armenia. And this develops situation when I don't think that going to extraordinary election even now is the right position. I consider that we are facing many crises in Armenia in the future, starting from economic, ending up from the psychological ones. And we need to overcome the crisis with, after that, being ready to make a proper election.
All right.
But again, I'm saying that this should be decided by the political parties, consensus, negotiated, and joint together, unified decision.
All right.
Parliament should become the place for that discussion.
All right. Let me bring in, because we've just got a few minutes left. Arsen, we've discussed whether this is political opportunism on the part of the Prime Minister, on the part of his opponents. I want to shift the discussion a little bit and ask how much political opportunism is going on regionally and internationally when it comes to the alliance with Russia in particular. Do you think that Russia sees an opportunity here for a weakened Prime Minister who, when he first came to power, he came to power on the back of the Velvet Revolution that was unseating people who were seen as closer to the Russian alliance?
I know we're short of time, and I'll try to I'll get to the question right away. Just want to make a comment. I fully agree with Hamazasp on the democratic path of solving the issue and solving it in a civilized manner. Again, just to reiterate, the calling for a coup is a very serious attention drawer, and I think what I was trying to say is we expect more detailed information about who was trying to do this, when and at what time, and that's what I meant. However, involvement of the military we've seen in the country, of course, and especially in 2008 when the ruling regime, that is actually in the opposition, now used the military to stop us, yourself and myself, in the streets. Fully agree. Moreover, Hamazasp, I will remind that too, in 2018, just hours before the resignation of Serge Sarkisyan, the peacekeepers came out and were protesting in the military uniform, which we were trying to prevent because we didn't want that tradition to become part of our internal
Arsen, we're running very low on time.
Very quick. The larger geopolitics and the regional developments, it is becoming a textbook example that in the former Soviet space, any country or nation that aspires democracy is being punished, and that punishment is territorial. And in that respect, yes, we've suffered that, which is a very unfortunate and a sad and extremely deeply traumatizing reality that we're dealing with. We have
All right. Hang on. Sorry, Arsen, but because we've got a minute left, I want to quickly get the reaction of the other two guests, if I can. In 20 seconds, Hamazasp, do you agree with that analysis which Arsen has just articulated there? Very quickly, in 20 seconds.
To say the truth, I was not able to hear, but I want to
that any country that former Soviet Republic aspires for democracy is punished. In other words, that there is a bit of geopolitics going on to weaken a president who unseated allies of a bigger neighbor.
This is a completely internal matter, and I do hope, and I think it's very important for Armenian statehood that military officials, as high ranking as they remain in their position and within their rights and responsibilities designated by the President.
All right. Now I think we've got 20 seconds left. I'm sorry, I want to try and be fair as possible. 20 seconds for Tevan.
First of all, we don't have military coup here. It's totally different issue. But what is referring to the issue of the regional politics, yes, it has been Turkey and Azerbaijan who initiated the war, and the beginning between a stance of Armenians and Turks in the region is coming from 1915 genocide time. That's why we need to be clear that there have been a very...
Gentlemen, we are going a little bit off topic now. We don't have anyone representing that side of the argument from Turkey and Azerbaijan. So perhaps let's leave that for another discussion another time. We have other people to join in on that. I'm afraid We are out of time, guests. I apologize, but we are out of time. We're going to have to thank our guests, Hamazas Danelian, Arsen Kharatian, and Tevan Pogosian. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here for now is goodbye.